Hello, everyone. Let's talk about Chapter 9 of Fawn Brodie's excellent book, No Man Knows My History. Here we are talking about the origin and narrative of both sides of the conflict that began between the Mormons in Jackson County, Missouri, and Independence, Missouri, that were trying to build Zion, as it were, and the old settlers, these grizzled frontier people that were gamblers and kind of a motley crew. And there was quite a bit of clashing that went on between them. The chapter starts by summarizing in a single sentence. It says, few episodes in American religious history parallel the barbarism of the anti-Mormon persecutions. I think it's really important to note that there is a lot of nuance involved in this complicated series of events. There's a lot of characters, there's a lot of violence and misunderstanding and miscommunication. And again, this is there's no internet, there's no cell phones, there's only letters, Pony Express, and as fast as you can get like a handwritten letter to someone is really the fastest you can communicate to anyone. So the word nuance is somewhat troubling to me. When I was first leaving the church, I left the church during the first quarter of 2020 during the quarantines when the church announced that they were not going to be holding meetings, and so we stopped going to church and realized, wait a second, our lives aren't so bad now that we're not going to church. And so in the early days of my transition out of Orthodox Mormonism, I found myself, you go through so many different stages. And I definitely went through a stage of, righteous indignation and even anger and a very a healthy response to anger. It's very justified, but it's not a place you want to stay forever. And I'm very happy to announce that I'm in a much healthier space with my own mental health than I was going through that transition. I would say a large part of the most emotionally damaging aspects of a faith transition are over for me, which is awesome. And this project that I'm doing, reading this book and offering commentary, is really just like a fun hobby for me. It's I really enjoy doing it. But nuance, this word, was a struggle for me because I was at a point a while ago where nuance was not something I was interested in. It was that Mormons are bad, the Mormon church is a cult, everything about Mormons are evil. I have a significant portion of my immediate and extended family are still active Latter-day Saints. So, I guess I'm willing to make an exception for them. But, I went through that phase of nothing good can come from Mormonism. Nothing at all. It's all evil. It's all trauma. It's all bad. And of course that's not true. A significant there's an entire Wikipedia page that I encourage you to read about the many criticisms that have been levied against the Mormon church. And so I think it's important that this chapter and chapter 10 that we're going to talk about next, after we read that chapter, this is not fun stuff. I hope we're going to get more into the dunking on Joseph Smith and making fun of some of the sillier aspects of the Mormon narrative. But these chapters are pretty heavy. I don't want to sugarcoat it. I probably won't make too many jokes throughout this time. Maybe a few. I like Joseph Smith. I guess I am... It's proof that I am much more happy to talk about Mormonism's good aspects that I'm willing to compare myself to Joseph Smith. But I will say that we're very similar in many ways in that throughout my life, I'm only in my mid-20s, so I'm not like super old, but many of the mentors and adults that I had at school growing up told me that I was a natural leader, and I've always had a pretty good sense of humor. I try not to take things too seriously, and so we'll see what happens. But Peter Bleakley, the host of the Mormon Civil War podcast, which I encourage you to listen. Like, I don't even care if you listen or subscribe to me. Like, honestly, the stuff that Peter is doing is top shelf, cannot be missed. His analysis of the civil war between the current leaders of the Mormon Pharisee Church and what he believes could be a loyal opposition to save the church from its utter demise is really worth digging into. Although I disagree with his conclusion that the Mormon Church is like kind of worth saving, I'm of the disposition of just leaving it entirely. I just have so much respect for that podcast and would love to boost that. Speaking of that, if this is a worthwhile endeavor for you to listen to the stuff that I have to say, I definitely encourage you to share it with other people. I served 2 years as a missionary, so I'm definitely accustomed to asking people to help out where we can. And if this project has been interesting or fascinating, or if you've learned something from anything I've had to offer, I would love to hear about it. I love more than anything to see comments. I love when people comment and share their thoughts. So please do. What are you thinking about this so far? Do you agree with most of my conclusions or inferences about the character and narrative of Joseph Smith and the early Latter-day Saints? Do you disagree? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So the Mormons move into independence. They're in Jackson County, Missouri, and it's probably pretty frustrating to have these neighbors that move in like as a commune. You got these big communist group of neighbors that move in. They all look the same. They all have the same religion, and it's not, I have no discrimination against people that are of the same religion. That's the thing that I went through my angry Richard Dawkins, God is not great, Christopher Hitchens phase. I'm kind of past that now. But undoubtedly, what I think the book makes clear is that the millenarian zeal that the early saints had clearly was rubbing the old settlers of Missouri the wrong way, and I can totally understand that. I went through my faith transition in the heart of Utah County, living in Provo. That is the most among the most Mormon places on earth. I've heard it said that Rexburg, Idaho, where I have driven through but never actually lived, is like the true 99% demographic, but Provo is about as heavy as it gets, and I can definitely feel I definitely know what it's like and can empathize with the frustrations that people have when you live in a group that is so lacking in diversity. I think one of the big criticisms of Utah, whether you're an active Mormon or not, is that it's difficult to say that there's a high level of diversity in this state, which, having lived in over 10 different states I don't know if it's 10, at least over a half dozen states throughout my lifetime as a kid with parents in the military, I can assure you that I have lived in places that are more diverse and welcoming to inclusive ideas and peoples than Utah. And it's a real shame because when I have lived in places that had a higher level of diversity, I feel happier. I feel like I get to know people. So much of the political strife in our country, in America right now, if you're listening in the States, comes from people being chronically online and not actually getting to know people. And so many people live in communities that they're really, you go to the store, your children go to school, and you go to your workplace, and there's only ever people that look and think like you. I work at a company the HQ is based out of Utah County, and the entire leadership are returned missionaries and overwhelming representation from like BYU Business School, things like that. And so that affects work's culture and things like that. And I can see how the Missouri settlers really wouldn't have taken well to these newcomers kind of being lousy neighbors. Now, it is worth mentioning, and the book makes very clear, that this is not the most savory bunch of people. If you've seen SpongeBob, the people that I imagine, the image that comes to mind is the salty spittoon, the people that are just kind of rough and tumble. So these are not like super social justice warriors or anything. These are slave-holding frontiersmen that can get elected to political office based on how many wolves they've shot. Kind of that's the kind of climate that we're in. That being said, this is one of the most profound things that I have read as someone who has lived in Utah for basically my entire adult life. I went on my mission, and then when I got home from my mission at the end of 2016, I moved to Utah in the summer of 2017, and I have been there ever since. And Utah is not super bad if you're a member of the church. There are definitely things that are not great. But when you leave the church, Utah can become a very isolated and depressive place to be. The grievances that had the Missouri settlers had, and I should take this moment to say I haven't said this at all, but Fawn Brodie, of course, this book is amazingly written and well researched, and I'm not reading the footnotes of any of these chapters just because it's so laborious and I don't think it's useful for this project. But just know that Fawn Brodie's not pulling this stuff out of nowhere, right? Many of these pages are scoured with footnotes. So there was a summary of grievances in August of 1833 that was given to the Fayette, Missouri Western Monitor. And so this quote, I think, is really resonated with me. They say, "The day is not far distant," they complained, "when the sheriffs, the judges, and the county judges will be Mormons, or persons wishing the court their favor from motives of interest or ambition. What would be the fate of our lives and property in the hands of jurors and witnesses who do not blush to declare, and would not upon occasion hesitate to swear, that they have wrought miracles, and have been the subjects of miraculous supernatural cures, have conversed with God and his angels, and possess and exercise the gifts of divination and of unknown tongues, and fired with the prospect of obtaining inheritances without money and without price, may better be imagined than described." This quote, this is living in Utah in 2021, or many parts of Idaho, several parts of Arizona, and other parts of the world that have highly Mormon. I think I've heard it called the Jello Belt, this Rocky Mountain corridor, and I think that is the funniest thing, the Jello Belt. That's hilarious. That quote that I just read, this concern they have of, it's primarily, and I noted this several times, but primarily the concern here is politics. It's, you have got a body of like-minded people moving in and settling into a new area with established people, with an established settlement, government, law enforcement, etc. And you've got a new body of people that are moving in that compose a sizable amount of voting enabled citizens. These people that moved in do not own slaves, and even if they are not directly in the interest of abolition, the very fact of them being there and not having slaves challenges the slave economy. I can't stress enough that the people that are against the Mormons, you should not be rooting for them. These guys are total assholes. Like, these are not good people. Again, there's nuance, right? Like, Mormons will say the people that persecuted the Mormons were the worst people to ever live. And there's plenty of evidence to suggest that the Mormons really did a lot to kind of deserve perhaps righteous indignation or concern, but certainly it doesn't appear to me that there's anything that the Mormons did at first that caused them to deserve the horrible killings and beatings and persecution that they received. Again, this is not funny stuff. This is not stuff that you really should make a TikTok about or make memes about. This is really anytime I hear someone getting tarred and feathered, I cringe, because especially a few chapters ago, reading about Joseph being like, that really made my skin crawl. It's just horrible to hear that people are capable of doing something so, committing so much pain on another person. I think doesn't matter what you believe in. That I think that's really bad. It says, right after that quote, it says, "The Mormon settlers were no more tactful than most religious zealots, and their very enthusiasm was an irritation." My goodness, has that Fawn Brodie wrote this in the 1940s, and then published in the 1970s, the second edition. I mean, that is Mormonism in a nutshell, right? Kill them with kindness. Mormons are known for many things. One of the very stereotypical Mormon traits is this almost, it's like an uncanny valley level of happiness. And I'm in Utah Valley, and I'm no different than any of my compatriots here, where you're not really living in Utah. You haven't truly lived in Utah Valley until you get a prescription for SSRIs. So I can definitely count myself among the main demographic of anxiety medicated people. For me, for different reasons, but you gotta love them. Mormons are so kind. There is I won't speak much on this topic, but the idea of toxic positivity is something you can look up. It's something that many people have talked about specifically within Mormonism and in other communities, but toxic positivity is absolutely something that's going on here. And you can just kind of imagine if you've ever been to Provo, which God bless you if you have, God bless you twice if you happen to live there. I am still in Utah County, but I'm no longer in Provo, and that's for the best. But if you can imagine a group of Provo bros moving into your town, there would be a lot of head scratching and definitely some things that would not make you super happy. I guess that's all I'll say about that. Let's see here. Yeah, I just wrote yikes, talking about we have to remember, again, a huge portion of the persecution heaped upon the Mormons was due to the fact that they were not slaveholders, and that was going to upset the Missouri slaveholding economy. This entire conflict is between white men, predominantly. The people that suffered as a result of these conflicts were numerous and varied, but it's mostly white men carrying out the legal grievances, getting mobs together. Meanwhile, the chattel slavery is occurring during these areas. There's just like an ocean of suffering being experienced by so many people in Missouri, and even the people that were the old settlers, or gruff as they may be, it is probably pretty difficult living in those conditions. I was thinking today as I was driving home from a class, if like the latest I would ever hope to be born is if you can get a clean hot shower or bath every day. I would never want to be born in an area or a time before the invention of modern plumbing and good hot showers. That's something I really cherish, and Missourians absolutely did not have this. And so you can imagine there's a lot of pain going on. W.W. Phelps, I won't spend too much time on this, but W.W. Phelps definitely puts himself in a pickle. He publishes an article in the Evening and Morning Star saying basically he's waffling about what the Saints really feel about the state of slavery in Missouri and whether or not they want to get involved in that conflict. And then despite whatever intentions they had, the old settlers are already kind of peeved, and they're looking for anything they can find to give the Mormons a hard time. So they read this article and they say, that's it. That we cannot, like, we have tried to be good neighbors, but we cannot abide. It's like that line from Community. I can draw the line at racism, but you can draw the line at racism? That sort of a thing. So I think this is really telling that the Mormons do, and this is something that the Mormon Church continues to do today, is that it's very political. It's whatever is the wind of the moment. Now, there's definitely things that Mormons pride themselves about being stubbornly behind the times on. But in this case of W.W. Phelps in this newspaper article that basically caused an entire settlement of people to turn against the Mormons. And again, this is like not just like normal people, but like town council people, sheriffs, law enforcement, etc. You have basically pissed off an entire city worth of people, enough to the point where they tar and feather W.W. Phelps. Again, this is not good, and it is something that should be condemned as vigorously as possible. And to my knowledge, and to the credit of the great and enduring state of Missouri, which everything I've heard about it is it's definitely not great for a lot of people, is that Missouri, I believe Missouri has in an official letterhead capacity apologized on behalf of the state to the Mormon Church and has done some sort of work to try to repair ties, which I think is credit should go to them. So, is there anything else I wanted to say about that? I'm not sure. Yes, there was one thing. So Phelps does say he basically is forced to publish the extra, and it says, "We feel duty-bound to state in this extra that our intention was not only to stop free people of color from emigrating to the state, but to prevent them from being admitted as members of the church." If you can recall listening to me speak, you'll recall that you can hear my voice kind of hesitate a little bit, not out of emotion, but just out of awe for the candidness. So talk about nuance. Mormon apologetics are imbued with the most oniony Shrek level layers of nuance and waffling, and this is just anything but it. We have a primary document, and there's even Brodie even puts a footnote saying that historians have pointed out that this statement really only reflected W.W. Phelps' opinion, and that the church isn't held accountable for like that being an official position. But that is, like, as far as I remember, that is the only Latter-day Saint specific publication that has been referenced in this book in the first 9 chapters, and it said that the exclusive point of the rhetoric of the Mormons in Missouri regarding people of color was to prevent them from being there as free people and to prevent them from being admitted members of the church. I mean, that is as black and white as it gets, folks. So W.W. Phelps gets tarred and feathered. I think he deserves to be maybe made fun of or censured in some sort of civil way, but I gotta tell you, I really don't feel like that kind of violence is really good for any sort of society that I'm interested in being a part of. And I think that brings up the point that the LDS Church, in my opinion, is based on a bedrock foundation of trauma. Joseph Smith grew up hungry. He grew up fighting every season for a good, valuable harvest. He had many siblings and parents that, I think there was love in their home, generally speaking, but these people were impoverished at the lowest levels, scrounging for life every day. That kind of experience traumatizes people. We have modern studies that prove without a shadow of a doubt that living under the poverty line has massive consequences for every aspect of your well-being, spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally. Socially, every aspect of your life is damaged by poverty. So Joseph Smith grows up in poverty, and they get screwed over so many times. Joseph Smith Sr. he gets scammed by the whole ginseng root thing, and they lose all their money, and they're always running from debtors, and the trauma of moving to Kirtland and the persecution that they faced in New York. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that Joseph Smith's money digging and stuff, he deserved to go to court, and he did. He went to court in 1826 for the Josiah Stowell silver, hunting for treasure digging. I'm not saying that they don't deserve to be held accountable, but these people experienced trauma. These people in Missouri, especially, they are told by a prophet of God who they believe speaks for the Lord that The Lord has commanded them to build forth Zion. These are people that I discussed in previous commentaries that believe that the second coming of the Lord Jesus Christ is imminent. Like, it's not like something you need to have some rice stored in your food storage away for who knows when it's going to happen. But like, every day these people are waking up. You'll see that they see the meteor shower later with the Zion's camp, and they think it's a sign from God that the end of the days is near. So these people are traumatized. You've got women and children, like very vulnerable, hungry, impoverished people witnessing their husbands, their brothers, their friends be brutally assaulted by mobs of angry, vicious people, burning down their printing press, stoning the men, lashing the men. There was almost certain, I don't remember if they talked about it or not, but there was almost certainly sexual crimes perpetrated against women and men and children. And this is really, really horrible. Imagine you're a child and you see your father, you and your mother are cowering in the woods because your house is being burned to the ground in the middle of November, where it's about to get very chilly, and you are watching a group of men harass and assault and brutally beat to the ground people that you love. Children are not prepared to deal with that kind of experience. And I think that is the root of Mormonism. The handcart company, the people that walked thousands, hundreds and thousands of miles from the Midwest to Utah under the leadership of Brigham Young, that's trauma. There is so much trauma in the LDS Church, and in the 20th century and in the 21st century. I would say the trauma we're experiencing now in the 21st century manifests itself more in the like faith crisis. I guess people are calling it one other word for it is a trust crisis, because it's not that your faith is in jeopardy, it's that you have lost faith, you have lost your trust in Mormon leaders through repeated centuries worth of obfuscating truth and equivocating about the true narrative of the Mormon heritage. So my argument for those that are listening, all 5 of you, thank you very much. I hope this has been useful, is that trauma is at the root of the Latter-day Saint experience. Our thought, our ideological worldview is rooted in inescapable generational trauma. And that's, in my opinion, that's just like something that is worth considering, and something that can give you more empathy for even the most despicable people that you see in modern Mormonism. It's a system rooted in trauma, in patriarchy, in systems of oppression, in systemic racism. All these things are not everything is unique to Mormonism, but Mormonism has not been able to escape, and is in fact entrenched, is in the mire, in the murk of some very significant traumatic, like systemic trauma. I don't know if that's a word. Maybe I'm not a sociologist, but that's all I'll say about that. So to lighten the mood a little bit, I hate Joseph Smith's use of revelation to tell other people off. You've got these people suffering immensely in Missouri, and he has the gall to tell them that it's like, there's lots of different things. It's God is testing your faith. God, there's too much iniquity amongst you, and there's bickering and strife, and therefore God has revoked the blessings that he would otherwise have poured down upon you, blessings you know not how to receive, that sort of a thing. And so Joseph Smith writes to this bachelorette who's got this lump sum of $1,400, which was actually a lot of money. $1,400 will buy you like a scalped PS5 on eBay today, but back then that was a ton of money. So Joseph says, I could tell you the whys and the whereabouts of these calamities, talking about the troubles in Missouri. But alas, it is vain to warn and give precepts, for all men are naturally disposed to walk in their own paths, etc. So what I wrote in my notes was, it's like the people like, oh, I have a girlfriend, she just goes to another school, or yeah, I can bench 300 pounds, but like I already worked out today, so I'm like really sore, so I can't do it now, but trust me, like that's the kind of energy that I get from Joseph Smith is, well, I can certainly tell you, due to my prophetic revelatory powers granted me from the almighty creator of the universe, why these things are happening in Missouri. But suffice it to say that until we repent, we're not going to see these blessings come through. I think of all the things that are justly can be said to in criticism in response to Joseph Smith's leadership. This is one of his most vulnerable character defaults, in my personal opinion. I would love to know in the comments if you agree or disagree with that. But I can't stand the extent to which Joseph speaks for the Lord in such a demeaning and condescending way to the saints that have died for him. These people are like, these people are willing to die for him. It reminds me of Lord of the Rings with the barbarian men that, I will serve Saruman, I will die for Saruman. You've got people willing to die not only for God, not only for God's revealed truth, but people who are willing to die for Joseph Smith. And it talks about later in the chapter about how Joseph began to realize this, like, holy crap, like, people have been killed in Missouri due to this conflict, on both sides of this conflict. And it's because of, like, me. Like, I am at the center of a lot of this conflict. So one of the things that's interesting about narrative is that Joseph writes a letter in November of 1833 saying that those persons, the mob, who are very violent and threaten immediate extermination upon all those who profess our doctrine. Now that's like the total Mormon narrative of like the correlated history is like, oh, they just didn't believe that, they didn't like what we were believing in. Like they were a different brand of Christianity and they didn't like the revealed truth. So they brutally murdered our husbands and men and assaulted our wives and daughters. Like, again, I think I've made it pretty clear that I do not support or condone the violent persecution of the Mormons, but I think it's just wrong. I think we can all agree it's just wrong to say, oh, they disagreed with our doctrine, so they brutally ruined all our property and forced us out of town. I don't think that's really how it went down, and I don't think Joseph Smith thought that either. But he was smart enough to write otherwise. So the only thing I wrote on this page, talking about the mob goes and destroys several cabins on the Big Blue River in October 1833, and I wrote, "Oof, like that really sucks." Like, it sucks so bad because they finally capture one dude. They get one, like the weak gazelle that the lion finally catches and that the rest of the herd is forced to run away. They get the one perpetrator of the violence and persecution. They bring him to court and they freaking arrest the Mormons. It's just like, you can't catch a break. It reminds me of the Count of Monte Cristo. Edmond Dantes is in the Chateau d'If, and he's carving into the prison wall, "God will give me justice." You have to feel, this is a moment where you can definitely feel empathetic for the Mormons because they were just getting so screwed. The political systems in place were totally against them. And to be fair, as that warning that I rambled on about earlier said, in modern day Utah, the Mormon, it's hard because in modern times they have become the very thing they swore to destroy, and the Mormon Church uses its political influence for a whole host of things, many of which are really condemnable. But you have to. But this is a side where the Mormons are really the people that deserve justice and are not getting justice at all from the government. Quite the opposite. Because you have to remember that you can think, well, Joseph Smith was an adulterer, he's a philanderer, and he's a really bad guy. Therefore, all the Mormons are evil. They're all in a cult. That's just not true. Again, go back to my rant about the trauma. These people not only fervently believed in the cause, and there was a lot better reason to. They didn't have nearly as much evidence, and they didn't have the internet. So if you grew up as a Christian and then the Mormon doctrine makes sense, you're going to believe it. So it just sucks that these people have to go through so much. They have to go through so much, and then the very government designed to protect them does not protect them. I mentioned Peter Bleakley at the beginning of this commentary because he talks about how one of the funny things about Mormon narrative is that it's commonly said that America was the place that God chose to restore the gospel through Joseph Smith, because the American concept of religious liberty was so robust and was the only country on earth at that time that was ripe for that kind of religious discourse and freedom. Well, the entire narrative of this story, part of the story in Missouri, completely refutes that. And it's so frustrating because so many times in the next chapter as well, the revelations that Joseph is receiving from God are so it's so clear that the God they're praying to is not looking after them, and it is not. If you really believe that the actual city of... These people are using code words for the city of Enoch, and they really believe that Jackson County, Missouri is where God will return for the second coming of Jesus Christ. In my personal opinion, you can go to Fair Mormon or Fair Latter-day Saint, and they will tell you a different narrative. My narrative, the lens through which I view, it seems so abundantly clear that whatever God Joseph Smith and the saints believed in, if he existed at all, had no interest in providing them the temporal and spiritual blessings that seem to come down so often. So, at any rate, just they just keep getting screwed, and it's just appalling to read the extent to which almost every person involved in the government, the legal grievances side, the sheriffs are anti-Mormon, and anti-Mormon is a really triggering word because so many people say, oh, you think Joseph Smith married other women? You're just anti-Mormon. It's no, you just haven't read your own, go read the LDS church history essays. When people say that is anti-Mormon, that is confounding and infuriating, but there is a true sense of things being sorry, I lost my train of thought. I totally lost my train of thought, you guys. I'm so sorry. I'm getting tired. It's really late, but I really wanted to do these because they're so fun. I'm so close to finishing my college degree. This is just something that I try to do, and I really apologize that I don't upload on a more regular schedule. At any rate, point blank, the government really screwed over the Mormons. Okay. And one of the things I'm also frustrated about is that can't you see how futile this is? These people are dying because they think that the Garden of Eden is in Jackson County, Missouri. I'm from the Midwest. One of the places I've lived for a majority of my life is Omaha, Nebraska, which is winter quarters. Of course, that does have some... in that part of the country, there's some Mormon history there as well. Of course, here we're a few hours south by car in Kansas City area, Independence, Missouri, Jackson County. why can't God just give a revelation? It seems so, again, from my viewpoint, and I would suspect anyone listening to this is probably of at least a similar disposition. Joseph Smith is receiving these, quote, revelations. Why can't he just receive a revelation saying, Satan has beguiled the hearts of men in this wicked nation of Jackson County. I hereby command you to seek elsewhere for the return of the Lord. Like, I just did it. I just gave you the revelation. In my opinion, what I just said is basically what Joseph was doing it. I did improv comedy in high school, and I like to think that I'm pretty good with my words. My dad was involved pretty heavily throughout his professional career in Toastmasters, which is an international organization dedicated to the development of the skill of public speaking. And so I think that I have ingrained some of those skills, and it's something that I really enjoy. I love extemporaneous speaking. When I was asked to speak in sacrament meetings as a missionary, I often went only with a single note card, maybe a couple scripture references. I've always preferred speaking off script as opposed to reading a script, and the commentary I provide for these videos is much more satisfying for me to provide than the actual content of the book itself, notwithstanding the amazing writing by Fawn Brodie. Every chapter I read, I'm just really wowed with the level of detail, research, and clever and sometimes humorous writing. A lot of these chapters do not contain very humorous subject matter, but Fawn Brodie just is so engaging, and I really hope that even if you skip my commentary, which I wouldn't blame you if you did, if you're just here for the chapters, there's so much to enjoy. So, let's see, I gotta wrap this up, you guys. There's just a few more things I wanted to say from my notes. Joseph Smith sends this letter on December 5th, 1833, and it is the flakiest thing ever. Basically, yeah, I got your letters. I understand things aren't super good in Missouri, but I'm not really sure who to trust here. So it seems like for all of Joseph's very strong leadership qualities, this was a moment in Mormon history where he was really kind of flaky. And again, I've mentioned this, but Joseph gives on December 16th, finally the Lord has weighed in. We go, what is going on? You're looking to the heavens, you're praying, why is Zion, hast thou forsaken Zion, sort of a thing? And what does the Lord say? I, the Lord, have suffered the affliction to come upon them wherewith they have been afflicted in consequence of their transgressions. I say unto you, there were jarrings and contentions and envyings and strifes. Oh my God, it's just so frustrating. Can you not, is anyone else listening as frustrated as I am with this? Imagine that you're one of the innocent people of the Missouri Mormon colony. Oliver Cowdery is presiding. W.W. Phelps has the printing press. And you're just like a normal person with a spouse and maybe a couple children trying to carve out a meager subsistence for yourself. And Joseph Smith, who is living on his like super fancy landed estate in Kirtland where the cows give you double the milk, is writing giving a revelation from God, saying, oh no, this is your guys' fault because you have not perfected yourself before me. You have not become prostrate in humility over the various weight of your sins. Oh, God, it is so infuriating to me. I cannot describe how angry I feel that Joseph Smith so callously uses the voice of the Lord to denigrate and harass his own congregants. And the worst part is they're so indoctrinated into this system of belief that they buy into it and go, oh, he's right. It was us all along. And then it's this cycle of grief. And so I'll talk about this later, but I really feel like one of the reasons that in my faith transition I ultimately decided that I was agnostic, and rather than like joining another Christian church or something like that, or seeking another religious experience, is at least in the Christian world, I take strong issue with the guilt cycle of repentance, this idea of sin contaminating your soul and needing God to say only God can save you. You can only be saved if you do not get baptized in the name of Jesus Christ. You will burn in hell forever. I mean, this is teaching this to children, teaching this to adults, but teaching this specifically to children. This is that I think that's really morally it can't stand. It cannot stand on its own 2 feet morally. So. I like Clay County. You've got these people that are sympathetic to the Mormon cause. It's not clear to me, and it doesn't go into great detail in the book, what made the citizens of Clay County more amenable to the Mormon position and being willing to offer them settlement. But I think I can't draw any inferences because they're just so lacking in detail. But what I want to say is we should strive to be like those people. If there are people that are suffering, then we should reach out and try to help them. And even if we may come to the conclusion that there are aspects of the suffering that could be solved through behavioral changes in the people that are suffering, that doesn't change the fact that we possess an ability to have empathy and reach out to people that need help. And so think of Clay County. Think of the people that watched these families be broken apart, and their homes are being burned to the ground, their property is being devalued, and they're being harassed. I think there are probably a lot of really noble people who maybe they didn't like the Mormons, maybe they thought that they were funny or peculiar, which is almost certainly true. Maybe they're even annoyed by them, but at the end of the day, they recognized that they were the victims of cruel injustice at the hands of citizens and the government designed specifically to help them that did the exact opposite. I think we deserve an appreciation for the noble, simple people of the world whose names will perhaps not be recorded in the history books, but nevertheless tried on a daily basis to uplift and reach out to other people. Sorry, maybe I'm getting a little bit... Maybe I should become a preacher. Maybe I should start reading the scriptures again. I think that it's very clear that I have a very Christian ethos in my worldview, despite not believe. I'm not even convinced that Jesus existed as a human being at all. But someone wrote the New Testament, and there's a lot of things worth reading. So one last thing I'll say, and then I'll be done, is that this is so funny that they send a letter to Andrew Jackson, and they're like, dude, you got to help us out. We are getting totally boned over here, and we need the federal government. Like, Missouri is out to get us. We need the federal government. And so the bureaucrats say, no, you guys are barking up the wrong tree. Seek legal recourse through the state. Don't bother the president. He's got other stuff to worry about. It says, the gesture was not wasted on the Mormon people, who were comforted by the thought of old Hickory quaking in his shoes, which is a reference to the fact that Joseph kind of includes this revelation saying, you will seek help from the president, and if the president doesn't help you, then I, the Lord, will, watch out. And I think this is so funny that, again, in the Mormon worldview, that the world centers around less than 1% of the global population is, should cower in fear if they don't do what the Mormons want, because the Mormon God will have vengeance. I just think that's really funny that they think that they're entitled to, it's like the wheel of time, like the fabric that the Mormons wield, despite being, it's like Randall Thor from Wheel of Time, despite being a poor, insignificant farm boy, he ended up being the dragon reborn. It's sort of a thing. So that's it. This is the longest commentary I've done, and I honestly feel like I was just on a roll. I would be absolutely gobsmacked if anyone listened to this whole thing. I would be really honored. I know, and I was thinking about this today because I was like, do people really listen to this? Are people interested in anything I have to say? And the thought that came to me, the Holy Ghost, the still small voice whispered in my ear that there are podcasts that I listen to like Mormon Stories podcast, like Mormon Civil War, and another completely unrelated to Latter-day Saint content. I have watched I've watched Bionicle lore, I've watched everything. I am a kind of person that can devour this sort of talking head content. And so that was comforting to me. It's like, well, I don't know if anyone else exists that's willing to listen to and engage with that content, but I know that I engage with that content. And so this chapter felt really good for me because I feel like I had a lot of important things to say, and I really enjoyed saying it. I hope my ideas have been conveyed in a way that was meaningful and helpful to anyone listening. So thanks for sticking with me. One last random thing that I'll say, and I've said one last thing several times, but this is truly the last thing, is in this chapter, and I think maybe in the next chapter, I was definitely uncomfortable with the word Negro, as I know that that's not like a slur, but in modern speech, that's really not a word that you hear thrown about anymore about colored people. So I'll do some research into that. I'm really not sure whether or not it's appropriate to say. And obviously, I said it, so at the time I felt like it wasn't a deal breaker. But I think it, again, and there's so many other things. I'm sure the book will talk about the Lamanites again. It's just important to know that some aspects of these books, not everything ages super well, despite 99% of the content of this book being exemplary and super good. And it's not even like it's bad, it is more just like it's not aged particularly well in certain things. It seems pretty clear to me that Fawn Brodie was not interested in promoting any sort of racism or anything. But that's all I'll say about that. Thanks. See you later.